A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. Glad you're with me on the program today. We're going to be talking in just a moment with the man of the week, Michael Cargill, who is the named plaintiff in, well, the case is now known as Garland versus Cargill. This is the challenge to the ATF's ban on bump stocks imposed during the Trump administration. The Supreme Court hearing oral arguments in Michael Cargill's challenge to the ATF rule coming up tomorrow. And Michael joined us for an interview before he hopped on an airplane. He's going to be there at the Supreme Court when oral arguments take place. And we're going to talk with Michael about this case, why he decided to bring this challenge, what he's been hearing as this challenge has now received nationwide attention, and really what happens as a result of this case. Will the Supreme Court overturn the ATF's rule? And if so, does that implicate the ATF's rulemaking in other areas like unfinished frames and receivers, pistol stabilizing braces, and the proposed rule dealing with who is engaged in the business of selling firearms? Take a look and a listen. Michael, the man of the hour, thank you so much for joining me on the program today.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, tomorrow is the big day in the Supreme Court, Garland versus Cargill oral arguments, and you will be there, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I'll be there up front, listening to both sides and listening to the questions that the justices have to ask.
Yeah, you know, I always hesitate to read too much into the questions, but I think you can sort of get a sense of where things are going based on the line of questioning from the conservative and the liberal wings of the court. The question before the Supreme Court right now is whether or not the ATF's ban on bump stocks violates the Administrative Procedures Act, right? Whether or not they had the authority to ban bump stocks or whether this should have been left to a vote of Congress.
Correct. Because, we're talking about an administrative agency here. We're not talking about Congress. The way bills become law, they go through both houses. The president signs it, and all that kind of stuff. That's how a bill becomes law. Not because an agency within the federal government, not the EPA, not OSHA, not any of those agencies, they don't have that authority to do that. And they definitely don't have the authority to turn millions of Americans into felons overnight.
Yeah, I mean, for years, the ATF had said that bump stocks were legal to own. Right. They were legal to possess. They were legal to sell. But then after the Las Vegas shooting, President Trump then sort of directed the ATF to see what they could do. And the ATF, lo and behold, decided, you know what, we've been reading this all wrong all these years. And in fact, bump stocks do turn firearms into machine guns. And it was therefore a crime to possess a bump stock, right? The existing owners were told, turn them over, hand them in, because if you continue to possess them, well, you're committing a federal felony.
Correct. And that's what I had to do. I had to turn mine into the ATF. And then that same day, we filed a lawsuit in federal court. And the scary thing about all of this, Cam, is because you're talking about they use that framework, the bump stock wording. They use the bump stock wording to say, hey, we're going to ban the bump stock. And then remove bump stock from that. They inserted the brace, they inserted triggers, and used that same framework, that same document, just remove one word and insert another word to ban other parts and other items that they wanted to ban. And so they just went crazy with it because we gave them that inch and they took the mile.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, to the point now, you get to add frames and receivers, right? I would say even the proposed rule that's under consideration right now, being drafted, I should say, not under consideration. We know it's coming, about who is engaged in the business of selling firearms. And,
that's correct.
And I will say too, Michael, I'm also concerned that if the Supreme Court finds in favor of the ATF here, that this could open the door, quite frankly, to one of the gun owners' top priorities, and that would be banning semi-automatic firearms. If they can say that, having adding a bump stock is converting a firearm to a machine gun, then what's to stop them from arguing, the ATF from arguing that semi-automatic firearms are readily converted to fully automatic firearms by their very nature, right?
Right. And that's why we go back to the definition of machine gun and what is actually a machine gun. So we're talking a function of the trigger. We're talking pulling the trigger, that function of the trigger. One round goes out. That's a semi-automatic. But if I pull the trigger, that function of the trigger only, multiple rounds go out by holding that trigger, then that's a machine gun. And with the bump stock, you have to press the trigger each time. So I'm hoping that the justices on the Supreme Court would take a look at this and side with the Fifth Circuit, because the Fifth Circuit did a great job of understanding, what my attorneys were presenting. It's a very great write up. So, we'll see what the justices think, and definitely going to pay attention. I'm paying attention to the Chief Justice, and also Amy Coney Barrett as well. So I'm curious to, the questions that they're going to have to ask.
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I saw a gun control activist said yesterday, well, the spirit of the law is with us, right? Because Congress clearly intended to stop these, multi-shot firearms from hitting the streets. Now, to me, if a gun control activist is saying that the spirit of the law is with them, that means that the letter of the law is not. So how does the ATF, or how did the ATF get around this language about the single function of a trigger? What are they now saying makes a bump stock a machine gun?
Right. They're saying that basically each time, even though you're pulling the trigger, they're saying, one round goes out, but they're saying because of the reaction of the gun going, back and forward, that kind of works like a shotgun. Somehow they're equating that to meaning that it's a machine gun, or it turns a rifle into a machine gun. And I don't understand, their mindset, of how they decide to change their mind all of a sudden about this, because like you said before, this was legalized under the Obama administration, and then what happened was, when Trump came into office, then the shooting happened, and they decided to ban them and just change their mindset altogether.
Yeah, it's hard to argue that this was not a politically motivated decision, given the timing and the circumstances that the ATF tried to, decided to revisit this rule. I don't know that necessarily comes into play at oral arguments, or whether we're going to, stick strictly to the technical aspects of the rule. But to me, this is, it's the motivation for the ATF deciding to abuse its authority, right? This was a response to a horrific crime. But look, as you say, we can acknowledge that this was a horrific crime, but that doesn't automatically give the ATF authority that it does not possess, right? Absolutely. If Congress wanted to ban bump stocks, or if Congress wanted to try to pass a semi-auto ban, which, by the way, I think would be unconstitutional, but that again, it's the role of Congress to create new law, not the role of executive branch agencies like the ATF.
Right. And let me be clear, what happened in Las Vegas was a very heinous crime. And my thoughts and prayers go out to the families that are probably still suffering today because of that shooting. But we're talking about, the ATF and what they have the authority to do. We're talking about, knee-jerk reaction in turning millions of Americans into felons overnight because of what one madman, allegedly did. My attorney, who actually argued several cases in front of the Supreme Court, is going to be the one that's going to argue, this case, for me. He's actually argued a case for President Trump. He's argued a case in the Supreme Court, also, for the fishermen as well. And with the fishermen, it was the same type of case. We're talking about, e-commerce, the Commerce Department. Can they create a right law? Same thing. So I'm confident that my attorney is going to be able to present his side of the case, my side of the case, and present my voice in relaying my message and how, exactly what the definition of a machine gun is. And also the fact that an agency within the federal government who is not Congress cannot create a right law.
What made you decide that you wanted to litigate, Michael, after you were forced to hand over your bump stocks? What made you decide, what, I'm taking this to court. I'm not going to take this lying down.
Yeah, I decided that really before I surrendered them, because I really didn't want to turn it in. I honestly, I contemplated, should I bury them in the backyard? Should I, what should I do? Should I turn them in? Should I go ahead and just cut them up and destroy them like the ATF said, cut them up in several different pieces and take pictures of it or whatever? Or, I actually, sat down and prayed on it. And I said, no, I think we need to fight this. I was upset at the time that everyone was on board. They said, hey, what we're going to do? We're going to go ahead and give up the bump stock. a lot of organizations out there were on board with this. And I said, no, I just can't go along with this because I was afraid that down the road, what was going to happen was, they were going to turn into something else. And it turned out I was right. And I'm glad I did stand up and fight this because we're talking about 2018. Here we are in 2024, and this case is now just going before the United States Supreme Court. A lot of people are upset about the brace ban. It will be years before a brace ban case can make it up to the Supreme Court. Right now, today, we have our chance to save the brace. We have our chance to save our triggers. We have our chance to save whatever parts and pieces the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, want to ban. And we're going to do that with the bump stock. The bump stock will be the most important case of our lifetime, because it's going to save millions of Americans from losing different parts, pieces, and firearms and from becoming felons overnight.
And hopefully rein in the ATF from continuing these abuses in the future. Because you're right, this is about bump stocks, but it is about more than that as well. I have to ask, I mean, you've been getting a lot of national attention. This case, ABC News had a big piece on this case on Primetime Live this week. What's been the reaction? Have you been hearing from folks, gun owners, gun control activists, about your involvement in the case?
Yes, as far as the gun community, everyone's on board. We're all lock, stock, and barrel on the marching to the same beat, the same drum. As far as the pro-gun community, everyone's in support of getting this case heard before the United States Supreme Court and hearing what they have to say. On the anti-gun community, they're saying, we're trying to legalize, or I'm trying to legalize machine guns. But, we have to, go to the NFA, the National Firearms Act, and say, you know what, I can get a machine gun right now if I want to. I can get a pre-ban. I can, pay a $200 tax stamp fee. I can, fill out the paperwork, get my photo, my fingerprints, and I can have a machine gun. It's the same background check I get when I buy any other gun, but I have to wait. Have to be registered, and pay the $200 tax and fill out the paperwork, and that's it. So it's not legalizing machine guns. It's not, so they're painting this false narrative of what this case is really about.
I think they have to, honestly, because again, they're all in favor of these ATF abuses, right? They want these to continue. They want to expand the ATF's rulemaking authority, even though they don't really have the authority to make new legislation to begin with. So yeah, you have to be the villain in this story for the gun control groups, right? You have to be the guy who's putting bump stocks ahead of human lives. And that's the narrative that they want to frame it. Whereas the real question, I think, again, comes back to how much power and authority are these agencies allowed to abrogate from Congress? That's right. It. And again, we know that if given the opportunity, administrations, including the Biden administration, will seize on tragedy, try to usurp the law, and impose their own restrictions in violation of the APA and the separation of powers. And that, to me, is what this case is about. We all, as you say, were heartbroken by what happened in Las Vegas. All of us, gun control activists, Second Amendment activists, want to see less violent crime. That's not the question. That's not the debate. The debate is over, do you stay within the bounds of the Constitution, or is the court going to give free rein to administrative agencies to go off on their own without any regard whatsoever for the federal statutes, as well as our individual right to keep and bear arms?
That's right. And I like to remind people, it's called the Bill of Rights for a reason. It's called the Bill of Rights. It's not called the Bill of Needs. We're talking about, you hit the nail on the head. I can't even add anything to that at all, because, I'm hoping, and praying that the ATF sees it our way, so that, we can go on and, exercise our Second Amendment rights and don't worry, have to worry about, whether this family down the road who doesn't know, not keeping up to date in current events. They call the police to their house for some reason or another, because some incident happened. Police come over to fill out a report to assist them. And then they find out, the police officer looks around and sees a bump stock or something that the ATF banned, and turned his family into felons because of that. And they weren't up to date on what's going on. These are some, exactly what you said. And this is what we're talking about. I'm doing this because I want to protect, everyone, not just the gun community. everyone, all Americans, and everyone should be paying attention to February 28th. This is a day that I think, we're going to make history this day. I'm very, hopeful of that. And so we'll see what happens.
Well, I am hopeful as well. I got to say, Michael, you are one of my favorite folks in the Second Amendment community. I love getting a chance to talk with you every time we have a chance to sit down. And I will be with you in spirit there at the Supreme Court tomorrow. I know that a lot of other gun owners feel the same way. They're right by your side. And I hope that we can have you back again. It's going to be a few months before we get a decision from the Supreme Court here. But fingers crossed, we get a good one. I'll be watching and listening very closely to the questions that are posed tomorrow. And I'd love to have you back in the future because, if it's not this case, you are always doing something to preserve our freedoms, to advance our rights. And I thank you so much for all of your activism and in every sphere of the Second Amendment. So thank you.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. As always, more guns equals less crime. Go out there and buy yourself a gun. There
you go. Michael Cargill joining us here on Bearing Arms Cam and Company. We'll talk to you again soon. My thanks to Michael for joining us on the program today. Safe travels to Washington, D.C. And fingers crossed we get a good ruling from the Supreme Court here on the bump stock ban. Right now, let's turn our attention to today's armed citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We'll start there with a case out of Memphis, Tennessee. You've got the Democrats in the Tennessee legislature saying, we need gun control laws, we need red flag laws, we need gun bans, we need, this and that, sensitive places. They don't want to talk about headlines like this. Suspect with long criminal history, including being a convicted felon, arrested again. Yeah. And it is a long criminal history. The suspect in this case, a guy identified as Wayne Sanders. Back on February 16th, officers responded to a Dollar General on Elvis Presley Boulevard in Memphis after they'd been told about a stolen vehicle. Officers were told that the victim was standing in line when she was approached by a man who demanded her car keys. He then snatched the keys from the victim, drove away in her 2004 Chrysler Crossfire. Those are cool cars. February 24th, officers said they saw the same vehicle, pretty recognizable, driving east on Wabash Street shortly after 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Two men got out of the vehicle and ran away as police were waiting for additional officers to arrive on the scene. The driver, later identified as Wayne Sanders, then entered a home allegedly armed with multiple weapons, tried to hide in the attic, ended up falling through the ceiling onto the carport area of the house, according to an affidavit filed in Shelby County. Taken into custody at the time, officers said they checked the immediate area and found 3 different loaded guns. One of them reported stolen out of a South Haven. Sanders' bond set at just $35,000. He was charged with 3 counts of being a convicted felon in possession of a handgun, theft of property between $2,500 and $10,000, evading arrest on foot, and more. As it turns out, again, this is just the latest appearance that Mr. Sanders has made in court. Going back 10 years ago, 2014, he was convicted of aggravated assault, sentenced to 6 years in the Tennessee Department of Corrections, but just 4 years later, in 2018, he had a litany of offenses, including failure to appear in a felony case, possession of a controlled substance, marijuana, being a convicted felon in possession of a handgun, unlawful carrying or possession of a weapon. His bond set at $10,000 in that case. Following year, 2019, when he still should have been behind bars for aggravated assault, he had offenses for criminal attempted robbery and aggravated assault. In 2020, he was arrested and charged with theft of property worth more than $1,000 or worth $1,000 or less, as well as, quote, especially aggravated robbery. And then in 2021, he had offenses that include failure to appear in a felony case, unlawful possession of a handgun, criminal attempted robbery, possession of cocaine with intent to manufacture, sell, and deliver. And I guess the revolving door of justice just keeps putting Mr. Sanders back out on the street, despite all of these arrests on, in many cases, pretty serious charges. And now, once again, he is behind bars, well, at least temporarily, on this $35,000 bond. Once again, charged with being a felon in possession, as well as not specifically theft of a motor vehicle, but basically grand theft, given the value of that car. One wonders how long it will be before Mr. Sanders is released again and once again appears in the court blotters there in Shelby County, Tennessee. My guess, unfortunately, is it won't be long. Finally, not finally. We haven't even gotten to today's armed citizen story yet. Let's talk about that. In San Antonio, Texas, where a homeowner shot a car burglary suspect overnight. I guess this was either late Monday, early Tuesday morning, about 3:30 this morning, so we don't have a lot of information here. San Antonio police say that they talked to a guy who said he realized that somebody was breaking into his car outside of his home. He walked outside, confronted what appeared to be two car burglars. At some point, and again, we don't know what led to this, but shots fired. At least 10 rounds fired by the homeowner. The suspected burglar hit at least twice. Short time later, that burglar suspect showed up with gunshot wounds at a local hospital. Told staff that he had walked to the hospital from the shooting scene, but officers found his red car in the parking lot with blood inside. He was then taken to another hospital by ambulance, at last report listed in stable condition with gunshot wounds to both legs. Police say they're also investigating whether another person was with this suspect at the time of the shooting. And the car in question has been towed away. The investigation does continue. And again, this is in the very early stages. So hopefully we'll be able to bring you more information as the investigation develops and continues. But right now, it does not appear as if the homeowner is facing any charges. Police seem to be investigating this as a case of self-defense. But again, we will keep our eyes peeled for any additional information out of San Antonio. Now, finally, today, our good deed of the day, in the right place, at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. A pair of off-duty officers in Fall River, Massachusetts, who were able to save a man on the slopes not long ago. Here is the young man in question, as well as the officers who were in the right place at the right time. Officers Guy Furtado and Garrett Nelson, off-duty. They were at the Okemo Mountain Resort back on January 28th. They were just doing some skiing when they heard a man screaming for help. 45-year-old William Paulson Jr. of Manchester, seen yelling after his 20-year-old son, Nathan, had collapsed. So the officers made their way over to where Nathan was lying unresponsive and started performing CPR. Nathan Paulson said he doesn't remember any of this. He credits, though, Furtado and Nelson for saving his life. Both men said that Nathan now on the road to recovery, and they are hoping that father and son can actually go skiing with officers Furtado and Nelson next year once Nathan has been medically cleared to once again engage in those types of activities. But he is alive today thanks to the life-saving efforts of these off-duty officers, Guy Furtado, Garrett Nelson from Fall River, in the right place at the right time. And again, willing and able to do the right thing to save the life of another. Now, that's going to do it for this edition of Bearing Arms Cam and Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program. As always, I'm looking forward to being back with you again tomorrow. We're going to be talking about this very cool event that the Gun Owners of America put on this summer. It's called the Goals Summit. It's going to take place in Knoxville, Tennessee. And you're going to learn all about this brand new event coming up on tomorrow's Cam and Company. I am hoping to make it down to Knoxville for that later this year. And looking forward to talking with the folks from Gun Owners of America about this brand new event and what they are hoping to accomplish by bringing, hopefully, thousands of gun owners to East Tennessee for a weekend of Second Amendment freedom coming up in just a couple of months. Be sure to check out BearingArms.com throughout the day. We're keeping you up to date on all of the latest Second Amendment news and information. And if you like what you see, I'd encourage you to become a VIP or VIP Gold member. All you have to do, go to BearingArms.com/subscribe, use the promo code SAVEAMERICA, and you can get 50% off your VIP or VIP Gold membership. As our way of saying thanks, we're going to give you exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, because your support really does make a difference, and it truly does matter. So thank you again. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe. You don't need the music, right? And of course, be free.